Morning, everybody. It is a Sunday morning. I hope you guys are doing well. Figured we'll just try hopping on and just kind of doing a live stream this morning. I'm still waking up here. I've got my coffee. Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about one of the common questions that a lot of you guys have been asking, which is if I could only pick one radar detector, what would it be? And for those of you guys, I guess maybe tuning in just now, that's what we're going to be talking about. If you're watching this on a replay, the way it's going to work is we'll talk about this for the first 10, 15 minutes or whatever, and then we'll hang out for an hour, however long it is. So this video will be long, but only the first 10 minutes or whatever. We'll be talking about, if I could only pick one radar detector. What's up, Nerd Mechanic? What's up, Prabdeep? Cool name. Zachary, what's up? So it's a question that I get a lot. I usually don't. It's not that I don't like answering it. It's just that kind of defeats the purpose of why I like radar detectors. Like for me, if you say you're only going to run one radar detector, like in my head, that's like, okay, you have to only eat one food for the rest of your life, or you can only listen to one song for the rest of your life. Like if I was to only run one radar detector, that would suck. I mean, a big part of what's fun is like getting different detectors to run. And I guess additionally on top of that, there's no one detector that I found that kind of does everything. And that's why in a lot of the videos, I'm like, well, if you want this, get this detector. If you want that, get that detector, right? I just did a video the other day. What's up, Albus? Doggy just showed up. Hey, Mom. The dog's like, do I leave? Do I come? So a big part of this is like, I mean, every detector has something awesome, but no detector does everything. And it's like, okay, I want to run this detector to get these features, but eventually I wish I had something else. And so I'll switch to another detector that gives me something else. You guys are mentioning Thea. Yeah, maybe when Thea comes out, we'll finally have one detector that has good range and good BSM filtering and cell phone stuff and doesn't false and like kind of does everything, but there's no detector that I've found yet that does everything. So a lot of it is like, I'll run one detector, then I'll switch to another one. And that's a tough thing to say. Like if I was to, I guess I don't want to compromise and only have to have one detector because I choose different ones for different tasks. So let's kind of talk about maybe some of my favorites and sort of my thought process between like for myself, if I'm not doing reviews, if I'm not trying to figure out what's best for you guys, like when I'm driving, what detectors do I like and do I run? So before, I guess, maybe the V1 Gen 2, a lot of times I would actually go and just wind up running the Escort Max CI 360. I really like that detector. It's got great range, great BSM filtering. I like the display. It looks nice and clean. I like the Escort Live stuff, but it is kind of a pain in the butt a lot of times to have to manually relaunch the app. I love getting into the car and just having everything work. And a detector that's custom installed that I can't take home with me and then accidentally forget to throw back in the car. Like that detector is always in the car. I can't take it home to do videos like this or whatever. And it's nice to just be able to get in the car and have it always work. And that's a nice thing about a custom installed, or if I wasn't doing what I'm doing and constantly testing stuff or whatever, if I just leave a windshield mount in my car, awesome. That would work too. But the Max CI, I actually really like that as a good all-around detector. Range, BSM filtering, arrows. It's got stealth. I don't really need that. It doesn't have MRCD. I don't need that. The Radenso Pro M or the RCM does have MRCD stuff. I don't particularly need that. I like maybe the interface of the Escort better than the Radenso. I like the sounds of the Escort better than the Radenso. And so since I don't need some of the advantages of the RCM, I don't use the ALP integration. I run the ALP standalone, so it's always functional no matter what detector I'm using. Plus, I like the added features of running the ALP separately, Pro Mode, Bluetooth integration, things like that. I just run the ALP standalone. So some of the advantages of the Radenso RCM, I don't personally need. So I wind up using the Escort more than the Radenso. But in general, I'm more of a windshield mount guy for whatever reason. I do videos about custom installs, but I just like windshield mounts more. I think they're a better value. There's more options. I don't know. I just like windshield mounts better. And so kind of going back and forth, like there's different detectors that I run for different reasons. So I've got like the R7, for example. This is going to be kind of my high performance detector. So if I'm heading out into the mountains or something, I'm heading out to where I really need range, this is the one that I grab. I can just put it on the windshield. It's got my lockout. It's got my low speed muting, got my red light camera alerts. Like this is a great detector to just throw in the windshield and I got great performance out of it. I'm not always headed in the mountains. The majority of my driving is going to daycare. It's going to the grocery store. It's just city driving, right? And so for that reason, I don't necessarily need the best range. And so a lot of times I'm just picking the Max 360C. I can put this in my car and okay, I don't have the range of the R7, but I don't always need that kind of range. And I like actually the better BSM filtering. The arrows, I've got the arrows here too, cool. Wow, door, I guess sometimes when people open and close doors outside, pressure changes. And then there's also things like the Escort Live stuff here works better. I don't really like the Escort Live over the phone. As I mentioned with the Max CI 360, having it over Wi-Fi really helps to solve a lot of the issues that I've been having. And it's kind of funny. Where is this thing? Going back there and doing some stuff. I did a video about how to install Wi-Fi in the car, and I've got this Wi-Fi thing. The cable just broke on me. This USB port thing, whatever, just broke. So I don't get power now for this. So now my Wi-Fi is kind of jacked up and I'm having to replace this cable. And so once I get the Wi-Fi functional back in my car, sometimes I wish everything would just work without having to mess around with it. You know, when I get that working and no mess and no fuss, then yeah, this is a great choice. And just for day-to-day city driving, this is quieter. I've got the auto lockouts, better BSM filtering, less range, but I don't always need crazy bananas range. And so for just day-to-day city driving, I like the Max 360C over the R7. Now, what's interesting is the new V1 Gen 2 kind of is a hybrid between the two. You've got the range of the R7 here, and you've got the auto lockouts with the Max 360C, and you've got, what's it called? The better BSM filtering. Something I've been experimenting with here is in order to get a lot of the features, you got to pair it with the phone. Like, it does a good job, don't get me wrong, without the phone. As far as a non-GPS detector, this is probably the best detector that you'll get. I mean, it's better than the Radenso SP, the Unit DFR 8 or DFR 6, like better range, better BSM filtering, arrows. I like this as a non-GPS detector. And some of the like advanced logic mode and stuff, it can actually do a pretty good job of filtering out a lot of false alerts, whether you're relying on Savvy for low-speed muting or even the built-in logic to filter out BSMs and some door openers. As a non-GPS detector, it's still surprisingly quiet. Now, that said, I still really want my GPS for filtering out door openers that the V1 can't filter out, or even some speed signs that if I'm at speed, low-speed muting won't filter those out. So if I'm in the city or on the highway, I face some speed signs that I need lockouts for. So for me, yes, I definitely still want my lockouts. Now, there's two ways of doing that. Number one, let's fire up the Android here. You can do it with JBV1. And so JBV1, great Android app. So Android app, you get your lockouts here. The most amount of functionality I get here is with the Android. And I think the app is amazing. Like this, if I'm looking for kind of the best sort of command center for everything, I'm running the JBV1 with the V1 Gen 2. I mean, I got my lockouts. I've got a nice display here. It's going to display all the signals on screen. I get my frequency display that I don't get here on the V1. I really like the frequency display. Not everybody needs it. I find it super useful, and I've noticed driving around with the V1 without the frequency display, I feel kind of blind, kind of like I'm driving around with the detector without arrows. Like, I really miss it. So yes, I find it to be extremely helpful to still have that. Now, I don't like always having to have the Android. I'm an iPhone guy. And so in order to run an Android, I have to run a secondary dedicated phone. I have to have another mount in the car. I have to always make sure this guy is charged. So if we're doing the stay home thing right now, right? If I'm not driving a lot, then a lot of times this battery may die if I haven't charged it recently. And then I have to wait for the phone to like boot back up and start up and everything to reconnect. If it's maybe like a longer weekend or something, depending on what phone I have, kind of the battery, it's like how old the battery is, it may die over the weekend. And so again, I'm having to just sort of mess with stuff. And it's kind of a pain, I guess, to just have to mess. And again, remember how I mentioned, I really like something that's just kind of plug and play. I get in the car and it always works. This I find to be sort of the best in terms of features and capabilities and all that kind of stuff. But because I'm an iPhone guy, I still have to rely on the Android and a second phone. And there's just weird compromises with all this kind of stuff. Now, because I'm an iPhone guy, my option here, if I wanted to do lockouts and all, let's fire up the app, would be V1 Driver. So this is great as an iPhone app to give me all the auto lockouts. Now, one of the great things about V1 Driver is it does an amazing job of reconnecting in the background. You can launch it once. There's not really much configuration you have to do. and it's just going to add your lockouts for your V1. It gives you the low speed muting. It gives you a lot of the filtering that you want, and it's great. So you can just get in the car and it's going to work. Your lockouts work. This can be in your pocket. It can be mounted wherever in the car. You can reboot your phone. You can update the software in your phone. The app every time is just going to reconnect. It's awesome. It's not like you have to get in and manually restart the app like you do with Escort Live or something. So it does a great job in the background. But the way that I run my phone, I have it connected up to CarPlay, and on the screen, I'll have my Waze and I'll have Google Maps and podcasts or whatever. And so my phone isn't really going to be visible to me. And so I got my lockouts, I got the muting, but I'm still lacking some things like being able to see all the signals and the frequency display. I can do some cool stuff where I can have maybe the frequency display here on my watch. And so as I'm driving, if I can't see the phone because it's tucked wherever, I can just glance down and see, oh, 34723, cool. So I've got the frequency display. Instead of glancing up at the detector, I would just glance at the watch or something instead of glancing at the phone. So I can kind of work around that. One of the issues that I'm trying to resolve right now is if I want the audio outputs to speak the frequency, because I don't always want to be looking at whatever, I'm running into weird conflicts. Because my iPhone is also paired to my car over Bluetooth and CarPlay, I'm still trying to resolve things like what happens if I'm listening to the music? How does it work if I'm outputting audio through my phone? It seems to work well most of the time if I'm listening to the FM or satellite radio or something, but what if I'm on a phone call? What if I have the stereo turned off? I'm getting different volume levels between my car stereo and my volume of the phone. Sometimes they're kind of out. And so maybe the stereo for my car will be really loud, so I'm turning it down, but then that means my phone volume will be lower. And the phone volume will vary depending on if I'm outputting something on podcasts and listening to audio from my phone, or I'm listening to audio from my car stereo through satellite radio or FM or something. So I run into all these weird audio conflicts trying to do audio output. And so that's kind of some of the difficulty is like every detector that I use, I can't just have it work and do everything that I want and just put it in and not have to mess with it. So like I'm still trying to find a detector, which is I think one of the reasons I'm hopeful for Thea. Long range, good BSM filtering, aka no BSM falses, arrows. It'll have the open API. It should be able to automatically reconnect, just like V1 Driver or JBV1. I'm hopeful. So I'm really hopeful for Thea to solve a lot of these things, but that's still a big unknown, and COVID-19 is kind of messing with everything. So who knows when that'll come out. So right now, I'm still trying to find a detector that does everything that I want. And that's one of the reasons why I'll run a detector. And then I'll be like, okay, now I really wish I had something else, or I get tired of always having to mount my phone and unmount it. And I don't always want the phone mounted on the dash, and this is visible to thieves. So I got to take it down and hide it and then make sure it's charged. And there's just everything after a little while will kind of annoy me and cause me to want to run another detector. And so I'm having a hard time, to be honest, finding one detector that does everything. I would like it to be the V1 Gen 2 if I could only pick one. But I'm still kind of trying to figure out this whole phone situation, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it work. I'm really hopeful that I can. I know some people with the V1, this has been having, just with the new design, some people are having like the detectors stop powering on. So there's been issues with that. There's been some issues with the new display. So there's been some quality controls issues, and V1 is shut down right now. So people aren't able to send the detectors in for repair. Mine is still working pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that. But I'm thinking if I can figure out the phone situation somehow, it would probably be the V1, but I'm still not there. And if it wasn't for that, for just day-to-day driving, a lot of times I'd rely on maybe one of the Escorts, the Max 360C or the Max CI 360, depending on if I want a windshield mount or a custom installed. The custom installed is going to have better range, cool, but I don't have the Wi-Fi, which personally I do like now that I've got a Wi-Fi hotspot in my car. Before I did, that wasn't as big of a deal, but as I mentioned, the Wi-Fi helps to solve some of the Escort Live reconnection stuff, which I don't necessarily need, but it is a cool benefit. I mean, if you've got it, cool. So the Max 360C is a nice kind of all-around detector. I do wish it had better range. The MRCD actually was just retested by Haywood, and it's pretty good, but I don't necessarily need that. I don't necessarily need RDD immunity. So I think it's a great option. And that's one of the reasons I wind up running it. I do run into some issues where like the mount is kind of big and massive. And if you look like maybe compared to the V1, see how the V1's mount is a lot shorter? This makes it easier for me to put up by my rear view mirror and be able to still put the sun visor down. With this one, it's a little bit tougher to do and not have it block my rear view mirror because the mount is so bulky. So I'm also experimenting with things like, what if I mount it on the blend mount, which is great. I'm really happy that the new V1, for example, the suction cup spacing and everything is exactly the same as the Gen 1. So if you already have a blend mount, I know a lot of you guys have asked, yes, you can actually take this and mount it on the existing blend mount. You just take off the suction cups and you put the blend mount into here and mount this on the blend mount. Detectors, it's just connecting at these suction cups. You're replacing the suction cup with the blend mount. So yeah, so that's nice. I know a lot of you guys have been asking about the blend mount and stuff, so I wanted to mention that too. I've got a link to that in the video description if you want the blend mount or any of these other detectors. I mentioned that. In the video that I did recently about kind of the best radar detectors, I also talked about the Radenso Pro M. I honestly find myself just not running it very much. Like I have to run a new power cable just for this one. I can't use my existing power cables. I miss not having the dedicated frequency display. I know some people don't need it. Totally cool. I like it. Some of the stuff with the lockouts, I find a little bit, I don't know. It doesn't have the arrows. I don't need the MRCD. I don't need the stealth. And so a lot of the things that it has, like the MRCD, I don't need. Some of the things that I like, arrows, accurate frequency display, it doesn't have. And so it just doesn't really kind of do it for me. I think it's a great detector for people who need it, but for me, I find other detectors have advantages and features that I like better, that I use more often. So with this one, I just don't wind up running it a lot. It just doesn't have the features that I want, and it has features that I don't need, you know? So for me, I wind up a lot of times not using it. The audio alerts, they've added some new ones. Still not a huge fan. I love the classic Escort Patents V1 tones. The Uniden ones with the little whistle sound chirp, okay, I guess. Kind of gotten used to those, but still not a huge fan of the the Radenso tones, but I'm really glad they've added new ones. So let's see. Ontario, Quebec, asking about MRCD. Some of you guys mentioned, Ben, looks like you've been running the 9500IX. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's why you can see, like, it's tough for me to pick one detector that does it all. And at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to a compromise, you know? Because most of my driving is just city driving, I'm not really concerned about crazy range. It's constant on, primarily Ka-band. I do have a little bit of K-band, and so I usually run pretty aggressive filters. But if I'm facing around here, constant on K-band and relatively rare in the first place, I'll run pretty aggressive K-band filters. So yeah, I mean, I like the Escorts just because it's more plug and play and self-contained, and I can get in the car and it works. The Uniden does have better range that I don't necessarily need unless I'm going out for very specific situations. The Valentine is great. I like it as kind of a hybrid between the Escort and the Unidens, but I'm still trying to figure out the whole phone situation and the alerts and the displays and the mounting and the powering and iPhone versus Android. So if I was just an Android person and I was already taking my phone and mounting it on my dash, this would be perfect. I mean, it wouldn't add any extra steps to what I'm having to do. So that would be great. It would kind of fit into my routine already. And so it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But because it doesn't fit into my routine, it just requires extra steps. And I would love to be able to just get in the car and have it work. Like even having my iPhone to put it in and having to plug it in, I wish I had wireless CarPlay and a wireless charger so I could just toss my phone in and CarPlay would wirelessly go in. Because it's wired, I have to like plug my phone in every time. And even that is a little bit annoying for me. I kind of missed my Miata. I would just plug it in and have it work. So that's what I did before. I had my iPhone. I would just plug it in on the dash and it was wirelessly charging. Great. It would connect over Bluetooth. Awesome. And it worked. So Mario, get rid of the iPhone. I have zero interest in getting rid of the iPhone. I am not switching phones just for one app. I like the Android, but I'm a fan of the iPhone experience with the Apple Watch. Like I'm pretty invested in the platform, but even if I was an Android person, it wouldn't really make sense because I have CarPlay. The way I have to do it is I put a phone mount on my dash and then I have to plug in the Android. So now I wind up having an extra cable running down my dash. I have two displays. I'm trying to get everything going on in the CarPlay. So that makes it a little bit easier, but I'm still running into some of the same issues and it wouldn't fit into my lifestyle the way that it's working. So it would be better especially if I wasn't using CarPlay, but it still wouldn't solve the problem. So I'm just still kind of running into like, I wish there was one thing that sort of did everything, you know, which again, I guess is kind of why I'm hopeful that Thea just does everything. Will it? I think so, based on what I've seen. But today, I haven't found anything that's totally solving every problem that I want. So I guess that's why it's kind of hard to answer that question sometimes is, yeah, I mean, there's nothing that I'm super satisfied with. I'm constantly switching, and as just a radar detector reviewer, I'm naturally wanting to constantly switch detectors anyways, just to see how well they compare, you know, which one has better BSM filtering? What about some of these usability things? What about the apps or bugs or whatever, the mounts? I'm constantly switching because I want to see how they compare. Like there's detectors that I don't run that I don't know as well, like the Escort IXCI, the IXC or the Redline EX. I ran them for a little while, get pretty familiar with them. Not for me. Cool. Done. Batman detector. Ran it, familiar with what it's like, all of its limitations, not running that detector. So some of them I'm like, okay, I'm familiar with them. They're clearly not for me. They're not the ones that are going to be one of my regular staples, but I'll have them around for testing and videos or whatever as needed. But they just sit here mostly collecting dust on my shelf. What else is there? R1, same thing. Escort Solo S4, DFR 8 and 9, DFR 7. Some of those detectors, like, okay, I've got better detectors. There's not really any good reason for me to run those over anything else. But it kind of comes down to V1 Gen 2, R7, Max 360C, and Max CI 360. Those are the four, I guess, that I primarily run. And again, for different reasons. And if I had to narrow it down, for just day-to-day driving, maybe one of the Escorts. If I can figure out the phone situation, it would be the V1 Gen 2. So that's, I guess, as much as I can narrow it down right now. And maybe even if I was to head into the mountains and I'm doing a drive where I need the longest range possible, I'm okay with maybe spending a little bit more time setting up my car. So I would pick the V1 over the R7 just to get the better BSM filtering. So yeah, horses for courses, right? They're just tools. Like I don't have any, they're just tools. They're boxes. You stick them on the windshield, you plug them in, and whatever does the job best and gives me the experience that I want. That's what I care about. I'm not really concerned what label is stamped here, if it's a Uniden or a Valentine or whatever, or Radenso. Like, I just wanted to do what I want, you know? So I guess maybe that's the, as best as I can summarize it and narrow that question down. Hopefully that helps answer the question in 22, 23 minutes. So anyway, there we go. There's a look at that. See on the camera, looks like Luna's awake. My mom just took her out for a walk and stuff. So how about you guys? I know I'm just kind of reading here. Some of you guys are saying you're debating MRCD stuff with the V1 or the Max 360. Do you guys need MRCD? Like that still seems to be kind of, for most people, a rare feature. It's kind of like stealth. I think it's an important feature for if you need it. MRCD, it's an important feature for if you need it. And I think a lot of detectors definitely should start moving in that direction, because if anything, it's just going to be more and more important, you know, like if it starts showing up in more areas, it's nice to have a stealth detector. It's nice to have a detector that can already do MRCD. And so if you're working on it now and doing the development and the bug fixes and the improvement and all of that stuff now, when it shows up, when it shows up in your area, it's nice that companies have already been spending years working on this and developing it so that when you do need it, it's already available and it's working much better than if companies have been starting from scratch. So if you need the feature, obviously it's nice to have a detector that supports it. And even if you don't need it, I think it's really nice that a lot of companies are already starting to work on that. There's also things like, you know, GATSO development, Redflex, Mesh Diffusion. Like there's other things besides just the MRCD. And I'm glad to see more and more companies starting to work on this, because it is kind of a tougher things that, yeah, it's just something that I think companies need to invest a lot more R&D in to really get it working well. There's nothing that does everything well. Thea should probably do the best out of any of them in terms of range and accuracy, actually detecting them. But there's kind of still mixed results depending on what detector you use and even what firmware you use. Like the R3 was just updated to 1.53. And one of the big updates was improved MRCD detection, like what we had with the R7. But I know Haywood just did some testing and he found the R3 with 1.53 doesn't actually do a great job against the MRCD. So there's still just kind of wonky stuff that companies are still trying to figure out. Sometimes things work well, sometimes it's still all in development. So I'm just glad that companies are continuing to work on this, even though nobody has the formula quite right and nobody can do it perfectly. It's kind of one of those things where it's easy to say, oh yeah, just do MRCD perfectly, filter out all BSMs, don't false at all, give me great range. Easier said than done, right? Like, to execute that is very technologically challenging, even though we all wish we had tons of range against every radar gun and no false alerts, right? Easier said than done, even though that's kind of the goal that everybody is trying to achieve in one way or another. So I'm just glad to see that companies continue to work on that, and hopefully we'll definitely get there. Let's see, you guys are saying happy with the R3 at the moment by KBitBit. Mike C, R3 for the win. Let's see, Dr. D, my R7 works perfectly even with red light camera alerts. Yeah. Let's see, backwards, picking the correct radar detector is dependent on first knowing your area. Yeah, and that's a tough thing too, because if somebody's brand new to radar detectors and they're like, hey, Vortex, what's the best radar detector? And like a lot of times it comes down to knowing your area. And most people, especially if you've never run a radar detector, you don't know what the officers are using. Are they using MRCD? Or is it mostly Ka band? Is it K band? Most people don't even know what the different bands are, much less what the officers are running in their area. So if we want to kind of narrow it down on like, well, if you have this in your area, get this detector. But most people don't even know what those are or what the officers are running. So it's kind of a difficult thing. So that's kind of one of the reasons why a lot of times I'm like, here's what the MRCD is. Here's what the MRCT is. I need to also get it for GATSO and MES diffusion and all the other things too. And then I wish the RDF-GS was both still being updated and still really accurate. It's kind of out of date and stuff. And I wish there was just an awesome resource to say, here's where K-band is actively being used. Here's where X-band actually is, and here's where it's not. And I wish there was that good information. That's actually, again, maybe coming back to Thea. I don't think you're going to have to even worry about that. If it can just identify K-band and KA and MRCD, you won't even need to turn that stuff off if you don't have it, because it's not going to be falsing. And you won't need to turn it on only if you live in the areas where it's in use. Like if it can accurately differentiate the signals, just leave X-band on, leave K-band, MRCD, KA, MRCT, leave all that stuff on. If it won't false, who cares if what's used in your area? If it shows up one day, boom, it'll start alerting. If you don't have it, there's no performance benefit to turning it off. There's no benefit to false filtering to turn it off. Just it won't false. So like that, I think would be amazing for people to say, if you don't know what's in use in your area, just put this on and it'll detect it if it's there and it won't false if it's not. Like that would be amazing. So that's a big thing that I think people will be super helpful for. Is John teaching Ray X-band? I believe so. I know he still has to train on all the different guns and all, but just a matter of, yeah, sure, get some X-band guns and train on them. And then, yeah, you'll be able to detect them just like anything else. So I don't know if he's done the training yet, but it's not that big of a deal to get the X-band guns and just train on them. Oops, let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see. Warpath, are you alarmed by the problems with the new V1 Gen 2? Actually, yeah, that's been kind of a disappointment. There's been a number of issues. I know when I was unboxing, there was issues with the button here, which seems to be fine right now. The biggest issue we're seeing right now is a lot of people are having failures where the detector powers off and won't power back on. I think there's like 20-something people so far in the forums that have reported that issue. Some people are seeing screen bleed to where one dot is lighting up, but the LEDs are kind of like sort of bleeds into other areas that it's not supposed to. So maybe the K-band will be lighting up, but then KA is also starting to light up. Just some display malfunctions. There's just been a variety of things that we're seeing, sometimes some audio stuff. And so one of the big things about the V1 is I know a lot of people have been saying like, oh, the V1 won't be released until it's perfect. And, you know, like traditionally the V1s have been super solid and reliable, but a big part of that is when they were first released earlier on, they had some issues and then there were some improvements made. And then after, I mean, the V1 Gen 1 was out for 25 years or something. And if you have one detector that you're continuing to work on and improve and develop, you're going to wind up fixing almost all of the bugs just because you've had so much time to refine it, right? This is a completely new hardware platform. I think Mike V said that there's no parts that they've reused from the Gen 1 to the Gen 2. The display is different. A lot of the technology is different. So there's going to be some issues that they're having to work out. And yeah, they're seeing quite a few. more than I was expecting. I would expect that once they reopen, they can address a lot of these issues. Mario, oh, thank you for the super chat donation. Thanks for all you do. I'm a fanboy and got the V1 Gen 2. Awesome. Had my other V1 for 17 years. Always on the windshield and still works. That tells me something. Hopefully the new one will be just as good. And yeah, actually, here, let's do this. People have been running these for decades, like forever. And yes, they've been continuing to be improved. And I mean, the new ones have ESP. They've made some hardware modifications. They've made some software modifications, but they've continued to refine this platform, and it's gotten better and better and better. This all new. It looks like there are some initial bugs that they're needing to work out. I'm sure they're going to start making some improvements here, just like they did with this. I don't know how many things are going to be hardware changes that'll need to be made, like the power on issues, maybe things with the display I think might need to be hardware changes. I know Mike V now wants to do software updates, just like we've got with a lot of the other detectors, which is awesome. You'll be able to update this over the app. But I think some of the issues will also require hardware updates. Bummer, disappointing, but when the R7 or the R3s came out, they had some issues with the display. The polarization was off if you're wearing polarized sunglasses. They had some issues. I know with these ones, sometimes the cases would split. We would get the lenses falling out. The Redline EX, there were issues where when you would put it on the mount, it would cause some Ka faulting, so they had to add some additional magnetic shielding there. Like, it's not that uncommon for detectors to require some hardware updates and some software improvements after the initial release. And we're seeing similar stuff here with the V1 Gen 2. I think we've kind of gotten spoiled with the Gen 1 being such a bulletproof, solid, reliable workhorse. The Gen 2, not really there. But to be fair, we're also seeing that kind of stuff with other detectors too. And so things that we may not necessarily see from the first couple of days, but now that a lot of people are getting their detectors, we're starting to see things there. There's also been some things with taking a look at the logic modes and when some of the K-band filtering that's being done when it detects a signal, and the quick trigger reactivity is not that great on K-band. And there's just a lot of things that we're discovering that, depending on your situation, I don't know. I like the detector, but it's got some quirks that I do think need to be refined and improved. And then who was this? The Jones. Any more interviews with Mike V planned? Not yet. I was actually thinking of being, I know he'd talked to me before saying, hey, he'd like to do an interview. This was months and months ago, maybe a year ago, just talking about his company and kind of I would love to learn more about the history of Valentine. They've been around for 30 years. I got into radar detectors in 2012, maybe 8 years ago. There's a ton of people who, you guys have been running V1s for 17 years. You've been running radar detectors way longer than I have. And I would love to hear directly from the man himself, his experience with Cincinnati Microwave and, developing all these radar detectors over the years, and maybe some of the behind the scenes stories of what it was like. Like, I would love to talk to him. So it would be great to do another interview, just to sit back and give Mike the floor, hopefully on camera this time, and just let him give us kind of some history lessons on the V1. I think that would be awesome. I would love to hear that. So I think that would be super cool. I'm open to it. Maybe if we're just kind of all hanging out here at home like this, why not hop on the computer? Everybody's got a phone with a camera or webcam, kind of like I do. Let's just hang out and chat and talk radar detectors. I think that would be super cool. So Mike, if you're watching, I would love to talk to you about that. I may shoot an email to you later, but that would be really cool if you've got the time. I'm sure you're probably kind of working on maybe some of these initial issues as well, so that once you guys reopen, you'll be able to maybe take a look at some of this stuff too. But yeah, I would love to hear your perspective too on some of the history. Yeah. Jag42, what's up? Good to see you. Last interview was awesome. That was super cool. I was kind of fangirling a little bit, like, oh my gosh, talking to Mike V. That was super cool for me too. So that was fun. I enjoyed talking to him. That was a great experience. So that was cool. K Samcell, ALP is no doubt the best laser detection if you're going to be the only vehicle being targeted. Yes, sensitivity wise, it looks like the ALP is the best. The Escort is just slightly behind the ALP in terms of sensitivity. It looks like the TMG and the Stinger are going to be behind in terms of sensitivity. Kind of, I think some of that is intentional, the way it's been designed. But in terms of raw sensitivity, I do think, yeah, the ALP and then actually the Escort will be slightly behind. Johnny Vega, hey, thanks for the super chat donation. I appreciate that. Should I buy a V1 Gen 2 or wait for Thea to come out? What would you currently recommend to use in Washington State? I currently have a DFR7. Okay, if you already have a DFR7, you've already got a detector with reasonable performance. The biggest weakness I find with the DFR7 is the 33.8 detection. And that's the main thing that we see by the Washington State Patrol out on the highways. And if you need longer 33.8 range, that is the biggest reason why I don't run the DFR7 and instead would run the R3 or the R7 or something, is the weak 33.8 detection of the DFR7, 8, 9 series platform. Now, if you already have a detector, okay, you can't get one Gen 2 right now because it's not available. I think almost everybody, like if you can afford Thea, it's probably going to be expensive. We don't know how much, $1,000-ish plus minus. We don't know. Yes, that's going to be a big thing. For myself personally, I think this is an interesting thing because you're like, you can get this. You'll get better range. You'll get better BSM filtering. You'll get the arrows and you'll get the JBV1 stuff. So I don't know if you're an Android guy, but if you are, you can go ahead and pair this with JBV1 and start figuring out how to use that app. And then once Thea comes out, John Boy has already said he wants to add Thea integration to JBV1. So you'll be able to already have a lot of the background and experience having run JBV1 for a while, and then go ahead and pair Thea with JBV1 and get a lot of the extra cool functionality as well. And because JBV1, there's such a big learning curve because there's just so many amazing features and so many options. Like there's so much of that detector. I'm still spending time trying to learn it and figure things out and some of the hidden features and options. Like there's a fairly big learning curve to it. And so if you wanted to start learning Thea or start learning JBV1, and then you'll be much more up to speed once you get Thea, I think that's a great way to go. Obviously, that means buying another detector that you'll run for however long it is, and then maybe replacing it with Thea, which you may or may not want to do. You can always turn around and resell this and get most of your money back, especially considering how well the V1s tend to hold their resale value. I'm obviously the type of person who would want to just buy every radar detector. But I know most people aren't in that situation, and you're not going to be sitting here doing reviews and comparisons like I do. But I mean, I think the V1 is a great choice. Go ahead and get it and start playing with it. And if nothing else, you'll have a much better appreciation for all the changes and improvements that Thea offers if you're coming from having run one or two other detectors. And I think if you're starting from scratch and you're running Thea, you probably won't appreciate it as much as if you've already run a couple other detectors. And like, remember how I talked about in the beginning? I'm not totally satisfied with any detector. They all have something that annoys me, and it's why I'm constantly switching detectors. If Thea can solve all of those issues for me, I would be so monumentally grateful because I've been having so many issues trying to find a detector that I like. And if you're running into similar issues and you go from a detector that has some BSM falses or Mazda falses or laser falses or whatever, and Thea can solve all that, I just think it'll make it that much better of an experience. And so, yeah, Steve, hey, thanks for the super chat, Steve. I really appreciate that. Let's see. David B, could somebody tell me what Thea is, please? It's Radenso's new detector that they're working on. The main claim to fame is it's using SDR, software-defined radio, and they're building in artificial intelligence to where they can just record different blind spot falses. They can record different radar guns. They can record MRCD, and they're designing it in such a way where it can actually really, really do a good job of seeing the differences between the different radar guns in a way that the other detectors actually just can't see the differences between the signals in the first place. And then the artificial intelligence can just do all of the training to say, oh, okay, I can learn on my own. This is MRCD, this is MRCT, this is a Mazda BSM, this is a Cadillac, this is a Honda, this is an Acura, this is a Hawker radar gun, this is an MPH radar gun. It's just going to be able to know the differences between all the different radar guns, and then we're not reliant on band segmentation or TSR or Caro or any of those kind of features. You know, it just knows the differences and it won't false because it's like, that's a BSM, that's a door opener. I can tell you what model of door opener that is. Like, it's amazing. So if you want a detector with amazing range and no BSM falses, it can actually just tell you what everything is. Thea looks like that's what it's going to be. It's still very much in development. We don't know exactly when it's going to come out. COVID-19 has kind of thrown a wrench into the whole things, but that looks like when it comes out, it's going to be the ultimate radar detector and kind of blowing away everything else. But again, for all we know, it may fall on its face. I doubt it, but just kind of seeing things like, you know, the R7 told us we would have auto lockouts after the first update. Didn't happen. We were supposed to get auto JTK with the ZW5 and ZR5s. We're still waiting on that. So I don't want to like say because a company told us this is what they're going to do, it's automatically going to happen, just because I don't want to be the messenger that says this is what they're going to say and then it doesn't come to fruition, right? I've kind of been burned in that way. But based on what we've seen so far and what I've even seen with Thea actually running at SEMA, and I think they had an R3 and a Max 360C, which were both false into K-band, and Thea was like, nope, I know what that is. I'm not going to false. It shows a tremendous amount of promise. So I have a lot of confidence in the system, infinite, even though it's still in development. I think more than if it was just a random pipe dream that we haven't seen working yet. So, hey, Bob and Mario, thanks to you guys as well for the super chats. So we'll move to you guys next. Bob, for Ontario or Quebec, currently V1, Magnum, Redline EX. What should I buy? Well, those are V1 Gen 2 is stealth. The Gen 1 is not. Do not run the Gen 1 there. Redline EX and Magnum are both stealth. The Magnum doesn't really have good K-band filtering, so you can rule out the older M3s. The Redline EX, I think it comes down to the Redline EX and the V1 Gen 2. And it was interesting. I know J-Dong in the forum mentioned we've been waiting for like the Redline EX 360C or something if that comes out. It's a Redline EX, maybe based on the Max CI, maybe based on the M3, who knows, but it would be arrows, RDD immunity, better BSM filtering. But that's pretty much what a V1 Gen 2 is. Great range, great BSM filtering, arrows, stealth, auto lockouts if you pair it with the phone. So if you're going to be doing the phone pairing, you can get pretty much all the core features that you need in a detector that's much more stealth and compact and less visible. Redline EX has, and this isn't a Redline, I don't have one, but it has like the big light, which you're going to want to display. It's a bigger, bulkier detector. It has the big mount here like the Max 360C is. So if you want a stealthier detector that's going to be less visible, I think a compact detector, something really tiny is going to be nice. And so, I mean, I think this paired with the phone would be an awesome choice there. Stealth, undetectable, range, arrows, BSM filtering. I would probably lean towards this, especially if you don't need some of the MRCD and MRCT that the Redline is designed to detect. And I don't think you have that in Ontario. So hopefully that answers that. Let's see, a video on JBV1 and V1 Gen 2. That would be great. Yes, I would like to do. So I have more videos planned. So V1 Gen 2, how to program the detector manually using the buttons, how to program it with V1 driver, how to run it with not V1 driver, with V1 connection, how to run it with V1 driver on the iPhone, how to run it with JBV1 for Android. What are the pros and cons of running it with an app versus standalone versus iPhone versus Android versus dedicated phone versus like all that stuff. I definitely plan on tackling. It's going to take me a while, but yes, I definitely plan on doing that. Luckily, there's a manual right now on the forums already that goes over JBV1. It's a nice big PDF. You can take a look at that. And I know somebody else is actually working on a tutorial going over all the different features as a video for JBV1. So there's other people working on that too. It's such a big app and it's constantly changing that it's hard to do a video because the video would go out of date in like a couple days or something as things change and new features are added or whatever. Looks like Mom's coming back from a walk with Luna and our doggy. So might hear the doors open in just a minute. But yeah, so that's something that I'm working on. It's going to take a little while, to be honest. But yeah, let's see. Okay, so go on. Factor Owner, appreciated the content. Very informative. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's kind of funny to be doing, let's do some radar detector videos when most of us are hanging out at home and we can't go drive anyway. So let's talk about stuff that we're not going to be using. Or that you can't even buy right now because the companies are shut down. It's a weird situation, But I guess it's a great situation to either just hang out and let's be distracted and find something to do like this. We're staying at home. We're chatting about radar detectors. It's a good time if maybe you're not working or you're working from home or you got free time. You can do some research. Let's do some learning. Let's learn more about this kind of stuff so that once we're ready to go out driving or even if lockdowns are on a break for a few weeks or something, okay, you guys are up to speed. You'll be ready. If there's something that you want to install in your car, Gerald, David, thanks to you guys as well. So once we're all able to go out and start driving normally again, or even just driving to the grocery store to get your essentials, I think this is a great time to kind of do some research and learning and get more up to speed so that once we're all ready to go driving, we're just going to have a better experience on the road. And I don't know about you guys, but I love driving. I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. And I want to have the best experience possible here. So if we can kind of figure all this stuff out even more so now, once we all get back on the road, we'll have an even better experience with our countermeasures. So yes, I know it's kind of ridiculous to be looking at radar detectors, even though we can't drive. But I mean, I think it's great to spend time learning about all this kind of stuff now while we're not driving, you know? So maybe just my take. Charles, just curious, is YouTube your primary job? Actually, yeah, this is my job, to hang out at home, play with toys for a living, and hang out on camera and talk about them. I got my website too, where I'm writing articles and I do videos. I love videos. I love this, you know, a lot more than writing articles. Oddly enough, the website, well, it's really important too. A lot of times people will find the articles, and I'll get more people going to the articles than the videos, just because if you Google, maybe you'll want to watch, or maybe you'll want to read an article and just kind of get the idea. And you're not going to want to. This is a 45-minute long video so far. How many people are going to want to spend their Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon listening to some guy sit at home talk about radar detectors? You know, most people are not enthusiasts. You're like, yeah, just tell me a good radar detector. I'll put it on the windshield and I'll start driving. So like the articles, a lot of times on my website, people will go there and they'll be like, okay, I'll just pick this one. I'll put it on the windshield and I'll go drive. But I love this a lot more. So I spend a lot more time here. But yeah, I've got website stuff too. But to answer your question, yeah, this is what I do full time. I just hang out here, play with radar detectors, some dash cam stuff too. I'm still planning a video that I'm almost kind of sort of done with. 4K dash cam comparison. Yeah, there's 200 something odd of you guys hanging out and spending your Sunday. Thanks for spending your Sunday morning here with me, just drinking coffee or talking about radar detectors. What a random thing. How wild is it that, to be honest, I can hang out at home just here on live streaming with you guys on YouTube and talk about radar detectors, and I can do that for a living? Like, that's crazy. I don't have to get a normal job. So I'm grateful that something like this even exists as an opportunity. And I love being able to share this with you guys and being able to make a living doing what I do for fun. You know, that's kind of wild. I'm actually really grateful that I'm able to do this. I think it's super cool, you know? FRF. You ever heard of Radar Roy in the US? Yes, of course. He was one of the original guys doing YouTube videos. He passed away 2 years ago now, a little while ago. Yeah, he passed away. So he's not making videos anymore. And his website has been taken over by some other people. So Radar Busters is no longer Radar Roy. It's other people now who are helping run it. But yeah, I mean, he of course was one of the people doing articles, and he did some YouTube videos and stuff too. But yeah, he's not around anymore. Warpath, how relevant are the older Escort M3 detectors like the original Redline and the STI? Great question. They're still fantastic performers against traditional radar guns. So like, you know, your standard KA band guns like this. I love the Stalker 2, by the way. If I could only pick one radar gun, I'd pick the Stalker 2. DSR 2X is nice as well for a dash mount. What a great gun. Good job, Stalker. But yeah, against traditional radar guns like that, yeah, an M3 would be awesome. It's limited in BSM filtering. It wasn't designed for BSM filtering. You're like, the auto mode and the TSR doesn't really help against those. So you're going to get tons of false alerts. If you need K-band, it's just not a great choice these days. That's one of the things we're seeing now with newer detectors. It's good K-band filtering, as well as being able to detect some of the newer MRCD, MRCT, you know, the Redline International, or what did they call it before? The Redline Pro A, I think. They had some MRCD and MRCT. So Escort was working on that back then. That detector wasn't really designed for the North American market. And it had some additional, I think it had K-band segmentation and stuff. But yeah, it's just not a detector that detects anything. Well, I guess the Pro A or the International one could detect it. So maybe I'll take that back. But the biggest thing would be the BSM filtering or lack thereof, and just a ton of false alerts. And that's the reason, one of the main things that Escort did with the Redline EX was try to improve the BSM filtering. It's one of the things about bringing out the new Max platform with their digital scanning and signal analysis to try to improve the BSM filtering. So the M3s will do great on long distance tests, but if you're just looking at range alone, you're missing the fact that the detector's not really usable around if you have a lot of K-band around, false alerts, BSMs, door openers, whatever. So great range, not usable due to lack of K-band filtering. That's kind of where the M3 stand on this point, which is why Escort's moving away to newer digital variants whenever possible of their detectors. And yeah, Barry, the question about Mike, I asked him about this in the interview, and we can talk about accidentally locking out police officers, and you can just run a good implementation of lockouts like V1 Driver, JBV1, and that issue is pretty much almost completely eliminated. The biggest thing is lawsuits. Escort currently owns the patent, and they are aggressively defending it. So you either have to license it and raise your costs for adding the GPS chip and the licensing fees, or you're going to get sued by Escort. And that's a big mess that Radenso got sued, Uniden got sued. It's a big mess for GPS functionality. So it's easier to just avoid that and wait for patents to expire. And in the meantime, say, why do you need GPS? It could accidentally lock out a police officer. Just like Escort said, why do you need arrows if your radar detector goes off? While Valentine had the patent, and then as soon as it went off, they came out with the Max 360 and then the 360C and added arrows because it's a useful feature, and now it's great. So a lot of it is not just, is the feature bad? A lot of it comes down to patents and lawsuits and stuff, realistically. But yeah, so there's that. Let's see. When do the Escort patents expire? I know people have been asking about that. There's been discussion. I forget off the top of my head now. Is it 2021? Is it? Sometimes I think the patents maybe have been extended. I'm not totally sure. I think there's 3 or 4 patents on the GPS. So depending on which patent you're talking about. So there's actually been some confusion about it, which I think is one of the reasons why auto lockouts hasn't come out here, because Uniden is still in the process of being sued by Escort over that. And they're still working. They're still in litigation. I'm not a lawyer, so it's not my place to say any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's still happening, which is probably, I think, the main reason why Uniden hasn't released auto lockouts yet. Backwards, let's see. GPS and a detector doesn't expire until 2021. Auto lockouts doesn't expire until around 2029. Wow. And okay, so that's for auto lockouts. One of the nice things that we're seeing from build it into the phone, like if you put lockouts in a phone, great. There you go. You've kind of bypassed it just due to the way the lockouts patent are written. The V1 has auto lockouts if you put it in a phone, but because they didn't put it in a detector, to the best of my knowledge, that kind of bypasses the way the patent is actually written. So it's one of the reasons why they're able to do that. So let's see, Andy, didn't we think it was last June and thought R7 was coming out with auto lockouts? Yeah, again, that's, I think, a big part of the confusion is like, which patents are we talking about and when was this stuff supposed to come out? So it is kind of confusing. I don't actually have a good answer. I'm trying to figure it out too. So a lot of us there's some confusion about it. I don't actually have a good answer to that. And you can ask the companies if they're in the middle of a lawsuit, they don't necessarily want to answer because it depends on, I've asked Unit a bunch of times, what's the story with auto lockouts? Haven't really gotten a straight answer about that recently, just because litigation. So I don't know. I wish I had a good answer. So in the meantime, I'm just saying R7 has manual lockouts only. Buy it if you want manual lockouts. Don't buy it because you're hoping that one day maybe it'll have auto lockouts. And if they improve it, great. If it gets added, great. But in the meantime, maybe just for realistic expectations, don't buy it with the impression that one day it's going to get auto lockouts, because at this point, who knows when it's going to come out. Any updates, Matthew, on Radenso Thea? It's funny. So I'm sure it's been delayed. I know John just posted a video. Was it yesterday or Friday? Saturday? I think it was yesterday. He just kind of took questions from the forum, and that was one of the questions, of course. When is Thea going to come out? It's on the FAQs, on Radenso's website, on RDF. And I know he was even saying he's glad he didn't give a date. And let's say he's planning on releasing it spring of 2020. Well, they can't do R&D. Everybody's working from home. They can't get parts. They can't get stuff built because everything is being shut down and delayed. And so who would have predicted this whole craziness that we're in now? And that's going to be affecting everything coming on down the line. So yeah, John still says there's a 100% chance of it coming out this year. Great. I'm definitely excited about that. But exactly when? I mean, who knows when all these lockdowns are going to end? Who knows when we're going to start be able to reintegrate into society? And are we going to start having temporarily reopenings, and then we have to go back into lockdown and then temporarily reopen and go back into lockdown? Like, who knows how all this stuff is going to happen? So this is a very bizarre situation. And so, I mean, who knows how all this stuff. So when is Thea going to come out? Who knows how much? Oh gosh, I don't know. So do you sell Vortex radar stickers? I think so. I've been kind of playing around with, like, I've still got to order some of the Vortex radar shirts and stickers and stuff just to see what they're like for myself. I've added it now on the bottom of the video. You can start getting some swag, some merch, as you will, like t-shirts and polos and whatever. I still need to order some. I'll probably actually do that after this video. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing. I had some made one-off that I would wear for like SEMA and stuff. And now that I've got like a nicer logo, I want to start playing with that. So yeah, I'll order some. And I do believe down there's options to get Vortex radar stickers, with different color backgrounds and stuff. So if you want them, yeah, they're down there. Logan, should I get a V1 or an R7 for city driving? I don't think you can rewind live streams, but that was the whole first 20, 25 minutes of this video. Depends on if you want to use a phone or not. Between those two, if you want to use a phone, V1. If not, R7. And that's a funny thing. I mean, we've all been waiting for a Valentine 2, but this is not called a Valentine 2. It's called a Valentine 1 Gen 2, kind of like a 991, 997.1.2. Like for the 911s, I know they've kind of always called it a 911, but there's different variants of the 911. Whereas this, they're always calling it a Valentine 1, but the Gen 2 version instead of a Valentine 2. But everybody's calling it the Valentine 2, and it probably would have been easier just to say it's the V2. But I guess that the name and brand recognition of the Valentine 1, they still want to call it a Valentine 1, just like they're all calling it a 911, you know? Or even the 911 turbos. Now all the 911s are starting to be turboed. So even the non-turbo 911s, now a lot of them now have turbo. So turbo is now being used to designate the fast version of the 911, even though the non-turbos also have turbos. So the naming can be a little bit weird. Or C63 AMGs, it had a 6.3 liter engine and then 6.2, and then it went down even. So sometimes the naming stuff is a little bit weird, but yeah, so they're all the Valentine 1 and they're not the Valentine 2, whatever. Just a funny thing. Imran, can you upgrade a V1 Gen 1 to a Gen 2? Yes. They don't reuse any parts. So what happens is you send in the V1 Gen 1, no matter what version it is. Well, actually, yeah. And then they can upgrade it to the V1 Gen 2. If you bought it within the past year, they give you an extra $50 or something. So I think it's $110 if you send in your Gen 1 towards the price of the Gen 2. If you bought this within the past year, I think they give you $160 off the top of my head. It could be wrong, but I think it's an extra $50 for a newer V1. You can get more if you sell it yourself on eBay or Facebook or Craigslist, but for them to always say you can always, upgrade and we'll give you something for it, they do make it easier here instead of having to sell. Or if you're in quarantine, you don't have to go out and ship stuff or go meet somebody face-to-face to sell it. And you'll get more if you sell the detector yourself, but you do have the ability to trade it in yourself if you want. So you do have the options either way. So yes, you can trade in your V1 Gen 1 towards a Gen 2. That's how that works. The downfall of the V1 Gen 2 is the phone thing. Yeah, and I want to do a video talking about that because I think a lot of people have the knee-jerk reaction of, I don't want to do the phone thing, without necessarily, and I'm not saying you do. I mean, I'm playing with it, and I've got objections to having to use a phone. But there's things like, it does a good job of reconnecting in the background, better than Escort's apps. It doesn't take a lot of phone battery power when it's idling, so it's not going to drain your battery to run in the background. It does a good job of automatically reconnecting and giving you extra features and muting capabilities. If you want some of the advanced features like being able to see the frequency, okay, maybe you'll run into extra things that may or may not be an issue. You don't have to necessarily, let's see. You don't have to necessarily run two phones. You can do it with your main phone. Like for myself as an iPhone guy, I could totally do it with just my iPhone. V1 Driver will run in the background. It will automatically add my GPS lockouts. I pretty much never have to touch the app again, ever. The phone will run in my pocket, and this will basically have auto lockouts, a lot like the Max 360C, without me having to do anything. They're even adding some new features that I think is in the public version now. It was added to the beta. Now it's in the public version, to where one of the issues with this one is the display just blinks and goes crazy in shopping centers because it can't gray out the display like the Unitons or the Escorts. So you can now have an auto dark option to where the display will be turned off, and only when it's detecting a legitimate alert or a new alert, the display will turn on and light up. Otherwise, it'll stay turned off and dark and quiet and visually chilled out, in addition to being audibly chilled out. So you can have it running in the background with V1 Driver and never have to touch the app again. And you magically have auto lockouts built into your V1 without having to do anything else. And as long as you have your phone with you, you got auto lockouts. If other people are driving your car, okay, they're not going to have your phone. They won't have the lockouts. Maybe something to consider. But you can add it in so easily without it really adding too much extra. Same thing, JBV1 can automatically reconnect. Its launching process is a little bit different, where it does want to be in the foreground, but then you can set it up to maybe launch Waze on top of itself. So you get in the car, boom, JBV1 launches, and then boom, Waze runs in the foreground. And then when you get an alert, you get an overlay on top of the Waze screen showing you the alert and the frequency and the direction and all there on screen. Like, it's this stuff works really well with the phone. I think a lot of people may have the objections of, I don't want to have to get a second phone. You don't have to, or whatever. So depending on your situation, like, does somebody else drive your car? Do you run an Android or an iPhone, or do you want a frequency display? Because there's so many little weird quirks here, it may be an issue, but maybe not. And so I kind of want to do a video going into this stuff in more detail, so you kind of have a good idea of maybe your objections may not be an issue at all. Maybe they are an issue depending on, yeah, my wife will not like to deal with that. Totally cool. She could run V1 Driver on her phone. You install it in the background and boom, she'll get the lockouts too without having to mess with anything. If she has her phone, you can make that work. Again, you've totally got options here. So we could always go into that. So it may be an issue or it may not. And I want to do a video going over all that. But it sounds like everybody's awake now and playing. So I should probably kind of start to wind down the live stream. But I guess that's it for now. So I don't know. I mean, I could sit here. It's been an hour. I could hang out with you guys all day long and just radar detectors. It's a lot of fun. But I should probably start heading out and go back to the family and spend my weekend not just doing radar detector live stream videos, but also go hang out with my family too. So anyway, just wanted to say thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. I hope you guys have enjoyed this kind of stay home live stream, chat about radar detectors, hopefully be a nice distraction, learn about radar detectors, whatever. So anyway, hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe. Make sure you wash your hands, do hand sanitizer. Don't go cough around on other people. Cough into your arm, all that kind of stuff. You guys know the drill. You've heard it a million times before. So hope you're doing well. And stay tuned. More videos, more live streams, more pre-recorded stuff. And yeah. Take care, everybody. I'll see you later. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.